Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to Women Empowered Wednesdays. It's our third Wednesday, right? Third?
Yes.
Third. Cool. We're doing great.
Is it?
We just said I wore my fancy leggings for you guys today, and yeah, I've just.
She walked in and I was like, oh, purple.
I don't know if I will ever go back to not wearing leggings ever again after this.
Is there anything else that people wear? What do you guys
Yeah.
wear? Pajamas and leggings.
This is like my formal attire in the house. It's either this or sweatpants, and this is like when I'm like dressing up. So I really dig it.
So you're doing great.
Yes,
Thanks for coming in your formal attire today.
Yes, formal attire for you guys. We did it. Thanks for joining us, you guys. We are today. We're going to cover. Well, we wanted to answer some questions first, right? We'll maybe answer one question.
Sure, we can do that first.
We'll answer one question, and then we're going to get into the 4-phase survival strategy for stranger attacks. We already talked about in previous ones about non-strangers, but we wanted to also address the stranger scenario, what that looks like, and what kind of tools that we can use throughout each of the phases of an attack. So we can start with one question, I guess. We've got one here. Let's see. This is from last week. So last week we talked a lot about boundary setting. And I think there's going to be future talks more on boundary setting because really, there's so much to talk about.
It's an endless unfolding of scenarios in which you can figure out which boundary, how to set it. Should I have pushed further or not?
There's endless possibilities with that. So, but this one I thought was a great question that was brought up after last week, which was, what would you suggest to a woman who has experienced trauma, who feels that her boundaries have been broken and no longer has confidence in her ability to set boundaries? So it sounds like somebody who feels like their boundaries in the past had been trampled, and then the effect that had was basically that they now don't feel confidence in their ability to set boundaries and to feel respected in those boundaries.
Yeah, demoralization can be a really big factor in whether or not we are capable of feeling competent in what we are doing on a daily basis. And so that demoralization, I look at it kind of like riding a bike. If you ride a bike, and one day you have a really bad fall, you will have some fears and traumas at looking at a bike, at touching the bike, and even thinking about another bike ride. And one of the hardest things to do then is face that bike again, grab it, and even visualize yourself, okay, it's not gonna happen the same. So visualizing is a huge tool that I use and that people can use to get past that re-engaging with it. Now, once you've re-engaged with it, now it's just back to creating and cultivating the competency or the trust in that you can do this again. So once the boundaries have been broken and things have happened, you have to first visualize yourself actually setting the boundaries with certainty, with bravery, with courage, and also grace, because that's something that we as women value deeply, like being able to do it and it goes that great and I'm feeling good and they're feeling good. So once you visualize and thought about how amazing it could go, then you start to put it into practice and you have to try it. Otherwise you'll never know it. You fail again. Now that's hard. I know doing something that has triggered you and traumatized you in one way can be very hard to reapproach again, but do it in small ways. Start setting boundaries in small ways with people who you do feel comfortable with that will actually respect your boundary. Sisters and people in your life who you're like, hey, I don't know why, but I want to say no to tonight. Can you help me say no to that? And then I can build this with you. And can you tell me how that resonates with you and maybe how I can be more assertive about it? Literally role-playing, visualization. What else do you have?
Yeah, these are all great tools for anything that we feel like we, have maybe tried and feel in our minds like we maybe failed at. And so, but the beauty of what we'll call failures, or the beauty of doing things and it not turning out the way that we wanted them to, is that those are all experiences for learning. And, the same way that this applies to boundary setting, it applies with everything else. Like you said, like riding a bike, or trying something else new that you maybe gave it a shot and it didn't work out. And that will affect our confidence. So then we have to, I feel like the only way for it to kind of breathe life back into our confidence is to have a new approach, right? To say, okay, these were the tools I had before, and here's how I approach this. Now, learning from that, what are other tools I can add to myself so that now when I'm approaching the same situation, I'm not actually the same person, because I have all these different experiences and things to pull from and tools to pull from. And recognizing that every time you try something, it's not going to be the same as when you tried it before, because of the knowledge that you've gained from your experiences. And so I think, this would be the same thing with boundary setting, saying, great, I'm investing into all these tools that I can use that will help me. Now, it doesn't mean it won't be scary. It doesn't mean that you might still have a few times where you go, it didn't work how I wanted it to, but we have to continue to practice. And those are great tools that you brought up, like visualization, and role playing as well with other people.
And one of the big components that we tend to kind of oversee because we want to really quickly get back on the bike is healing. There is a healing process that it might be time, it might be processing, it might be working through, and healing cannot be overlooked. I cannot stress this enough. And that means even 10 years later, something happened to you 10 years ago and you realize, wow, I never visited that in a way that I could truly heal it. I have to deconstruct what is it in me that is unhealed about this component of my life system, and don't dwell on it. Don't sit in there and feel, the sorrow for the next 5 years, but sit in it and empower yourself with that sensitivity and vulnerability and go, why does it have such a grasp on my emotional existence, on my reactivity? And how can I give it the nurturing and internal love that it might need to know that it was okay that I didn't know those boundary setting techniques then. It was okay that someone took advantage of a naive me and I came out stronger on the other end. And it was okay that I wasn't equipped. And giving ourselves almost the grace of forgiveness. It's okay, little Victoria. You had no idea how to tell someone not to grab your butt. Like, that's okay that maybe you didn't respond in a certain way that you wish you could now. And that's what life is, a series of experiences that strengthens our response systems, our nervous systems, our mental and emotional understanding of situations. And as you strengthen that tool belt, that's why these 40-year-old women that I know, they are incredible. They are like women, wizard, witches, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you so centered, so full of life. So knowing who you are? And it's because they've had the life experiences. So
and we only get better.
Yeah.
50s, 60s, 70s.
Aging like wine divas.
The wisdom just keeps coming.
Yeah. So don't deny your life experiences. You can wallow in it for a little bit. I'm not going to deny you some wallow. I do it myself. But use it. Use the gifts of life and bloom from it. Grow.
Beautiful. Awesome. All right. So we are going to get into what we feel like is a really important talk, and kind of, I would say, almost like what laid the groundwork for a lot of the Women Empowered program is understanding this.
And it's also like women's worst nightmare. Even though we've talked about this before. We did the non-stranger strategies the first week. And what we realized is that even though that's 75% of the actual reality that happens to women, more, right? 78, something like that.
Yeah.
The ones that we actually fear most are the stranger ones that are a smaller fraction, but it is the ones we have nightmares about. It's the one they write movies about.
It's the one that we see on the news, right? So there's reasons, other societal reasons, and I think that has to do with our societal constructs about safety, that we want to be able to feel like we can trust people around us.
Yeah.
But it's more palatable to think about somebody that we don't know, or somebody who society deems as bad or wrong doing these types of crimes, instead of the guy that you knew in college, right? So that's a harder thing to swallow. But these things do happen. And because, they do affect as how women approach their every single day lives. And I think that's where, a lot of men don't recognize that. And I've had such interesting talks with Henner and just with other men in my life. And it's important for them to recognize how women just live their lives differently.
Yeah.
Based on these fears and based on the thought that we know that these things do happen and that we have to take them into consideration every time we leave our house and as we go about our everyday lives.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I sat with Hidon one time watching a movie that demonstrated kind of a lot of the verbal, nonverbal, and aggressive and non-aggressive abuse towards women and violence against women. And he got like emotional, and he would pause it and look at me. He's like, I'm so sorry. It's almost like they don't sometimes really understand the gravity of the life that we live as women that is just normal for us. Like when we asked them, there was that term where they asked a whole group of men and a whole group of women, like, what is your greatest fear? And men's entire response of the entire like subgroup was to be embarrassed, to be made fun of by a woman. And then they asked all these women and said, what is your greatest fear? And they were like, to be killed and or raped. And when you see the gravity of the difference of the two genders' natural lives and fears that are realities for them, then you can actually look at this and go, wow, this is a very different way that you're running your premeditated life day. And when we wake up, how we have to like equip ourselves emotionally for the day versus a man.
And that's what we want to talk about today is ways to equip ourselves without it feeling heavy and without it weighing us down and feeling paranoid for the rest of our lives. So how do we equip ourselves, and how do we feel like we have tools and have a strategy for these types of scenarios when they arise, but not living our lives completely, overwhelmed by fear every time that we leave our house? So that's why we want to get into this. So when we talk about, again, these stranger types of attacks or assaults, we typically break them down into a 4-phase strategy based on the attacker, the predator's approach, right? And our belief is that once you understand the perpetrator's strategy, then we can implement our strategies to basically make it so that they are not successful. So that's really the objective here, right?
Once you know what they want to do, we know how to neutralize it.
Exactly. Instead of just shooting in the dark and trying to figure out and making it about us, it's actually not about us. It's about them and what they want to carry out. And then we go, okay, based on what they want to carry out, now we know what tools we have to combat that. So the 4 phases of the stranger attack strategy. Phase 1 is to identify an unsuspecting target. Phase 2 is to subdue and isolate the target. Phase 3 is to take the target to a surface or a ground and to control and exhaust the target. And phase 4 would be to carry out the assault. So that's kind of a brief bullet point of the 4 phases, and we're going to go into these in depth today. Because as we mentioned, each of these phases has a different strategy, offensive strategy, therefore it's going to have a different defensive strategy. So we want to make sure that we're aware of how we change our strategies in each of the phases. So I think we could start with phase 1, which is...
No, we should start with phase 4.
Yeah, right? Get straight to it.
I can't.
Phase 1, identify an unsuspecting target. Okay, so again, this is their objective. Now, the key word there is unsuspecting, right? But it's important to note that just because that is their objective does not mean that one must be unsuspecting for this to happen, or that a person potentially could be suspecting something to happen. It could still occur, right?
Correct.
So this is more focused on, again, their objective. How would they like this to happen? They would like their opponent, their target to be unsuspecting. Why? Because they can get as close to them as possible without being detected and without a potential bystander intervening. They want this engagement to happen quickly and quietly so that they don't get caught, right? There's a reason why these things keep happening, because men are able to carry this out and not end up in jail and not get caught for this.
Yeah.
So there is a strategy there. They're not just saying, hey, I'm gonna do this and if I end up in jail, no problem. There might be some crazy people who do that, but the majority do have a strategy in terms of not getting caught with this.
And understanding that strategy, one of our main tools that we can use against this is simply awareness. And that's a tough thing to say. Everybody, be aware. Okay, bye. Yeah. It's a global thing that when we tell women this, we're like, yep, be aware. Always look up, identify your surroundings, know what's happening. But we also have to let reality set in a little bit, because we're on our phones, or we have kids who are looking at us, or we just want to appreciate nature at one point. So a full awareness, up in base, always coming around here, is not necessarily a realistic expectation for ourselves.
Yeah, and it feels overwhelming, right?
Anxiety.
To just basically say your job now is to be hyper vigilant for the rest of your life in all cases ever. That feels overwhelming to women, and it almost feels like I can't live my life like that. So I guess I'm just gonna, either you don't engage in that at all, or you feel like it's like kind of all or nothing. So what we want to talk about is how we can take this principle of awareness and hypervigilance, but understand the specific scenarios in which this is most important. And in order to do that, we have to understand this concept called the triangle of victimization. And we identify this. It's very simple. It'll make total sense to you guys, but it just helps us paint the picture. And in order for an assault or a crime like this to carry out, there has to be 3 things present, right? There has to be a predator, there has to be a target, and there has to be an opportunity for that to happen. Now, there's some examples of where, if you could be a target and there could be a predator right next to you, at a restaurant, sitting in the table right next to you. You have no clue who they are, but they're the predator and you're a target. Okay. Now, based on the situation, there is not a prime opportunity for them to execute any type of assault because there's tons of bystanders around. They're not going to get away with this, right? So the opportunity is not there. Now that might change when you leave the restaurant, right? And your friend goes the other way, and you go the other, and now you're going, walking to your car, and you're in an alleyway walking through, and the same person now is there. So now the opportunity has changed, the environment has changed. And what does opportunity mean? Really, opportunity is inversely correlated to the likelihood of bystander intervention. So for those of you who are not good at math, let's talk about that. What that means is basically the more likely a bystander will intervene, the lower the opportunity, right? The least likely opportunity for the bystander to intervene, the higher the opportunity. Right, so simply put, if there's tons of people around, if it's broad daylight, chances are a little bit lower. Opportunity is lower. If it's dark, if there's not many people around, if the chances of being caught are slim, opportunity is higher, right? This does not mean that things don't happen in broad daylight with people around. That can happen, but our risks go way down when that occurs. So just identifying that and knowing, okay, when there's a prime opportunity for somebody to carry something out, that's when our vigilance can go up. And we can,
and then we talk about response tactics.
Yeah, and what does vigilance look like? What does hypervigilance look like?
Yeah.
Does it mean you just walk, like Victoria said, do you walk around in base all the time?
All the time.
So, but really, I think what that looks like is going back to this idea of their objective, unsuspecting target, right? Yeah. So, and just to be clear, studies have shown that it's not necessarily the person, they don't say, oh, all targets fit a certain look or demographic. It's not about the target at all. It's more about the opportunity, right? So when people say, oh, you shouldn't dress this way or that way or look a certain, that actually is, that's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is the opportunity and the chance to basically get as close as possible. So in order to appear unsuspected, what are some things we could do?
Well, one of the main ones is eye contact. Identifying what you're seeing, that this person is clearly scoping you out. You're like, I see you. I know you. And being willing to vocalize, hey, why are you following me? Like, hey, back up. Or if it's in a restaurant, you can say, I'd like to move tables. You can make the move yourself. And for me, like even getting groceries, I say, can you walk me to my car? I see someone that's following me. So eliciting help, making eye contact, having what I call strong body language. Wonder Woman stance at all times.
Yes.
Hey!
Hands on hips.
Yeah.
Right?
So all of these factors can mitigate some of their maybe ideas of how you could be that opportunity for them, which is that you are a struggle, you're a strong stance, you look like you might be willing to get some external bystander to get involved, which again is not something that they want.
Right. And I think we can talk in a little bit about the specifics of how to verbalize yourselves and how to actually engage with them verbally. But even before that point happens, maybe it's just somebody way down the street and they're walking on the other side and they're not really picked up as a threat potentially yet, but you just are like, I want them to know that I see them. And this is where, when it comes to eye contact, I think a lot of women have an issue with this. I know I did for so many years. I think we talked about this last week maybe, but it's hard. Like most women feel like when you make eye contact with somebody, it's an invitation for a conversation, for engagement. So how do we make eye contact with somebody in a way that does not make them think that, right? And we all know how to give like that kind of eye contact. Like we know when you're like, oh, let's, hey, hey, let's talk, versus we can do that, right? And so how do we make eye contact with somebody? And for me, it had like, what we like to practice, and I think a way to think about it is like you almost have a thought in your head, which is like you're basically saying like, I see you, and I keep walking. And I like a little head nod too, because it's like very official. It's like, good day, sir, or like, I see you, mofo, whatever. Like you're just basically acknowledging them, and it's like a head nod. You're looking at them, and then you keep walking. So it's very much like I acknowledge you, and I'm about on my way. It does not feel like you're staring or looking, and there's no opportunity for that. You don't even allow them opportunity to look back or say anything. It's just, I see you, and then maybe you're, if you have to, you can keep eye contact, but we can practice that type of eye contact, and that is, again, showing that you see them, they're on your radar, but this is not an opportunity to want to talk, right?
It's almost like switch on your militant, like affirmative.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And what's interesting about this is that it is a really good tactic. And even this might not deter them from moving forward. But I'll give you a story. Yesterday when I was walking, or the other day I was walking down my street, a guy was riding on a bike, and I looked at him and I said, good evening. It's a very good day, sir. Good evening. And he's like, oh, hey, oh, yeah. good smile. And I was like, and I took a deep breath and I'm like, oh my gosh. But what did that tell me? Initially, it told me that he is not understood, that like, he's not, hey, understanding about a distance almost. So what did I do? As he rode by me in his bike, I turned around and watched him right away. I waited and I waited and I walked backwards a little bit because I wanted to make sure that he not only continued forward and was out of the way, but that he wasn't looking back at me with any intentions or ulterior motives. Yes, was it gross? Was it like, ugh, like all the shimmy shakes off of the yuckiness? But I also stood my ground and go, okay, what do I have to be prepared for right now? So even the affirmative, good day, sir, may get you someone who is creepy or just this interesting comment, but being prepared at any moment, I'm like, I don't want to have to use this, but all right, bring it. Like, I'm ready.
I will use my laser beams to stare you down. But that you brought up another good point, which is another one of the most important tool ever is just distance, right? So trusting that if we do feel like somebody is, potentially approaching us, or maybe they're walking down the street and you see them, and then you're just like, I don't really want to take my chance walking across them. We can cross the street, or we can decide to turn around and say, you know what, I'm gonna take a different route right now. And so just trusting our instincts, allowing ourselves distance. Distance is our first line of defense. So all in this phase 1, we can implement those, right? Now we can talk a little bit, and this kind of teeters on the line of phase 1 and 2, but it is important to talk about, there's one thing of just someone in the distance. I want to make sure they know I'm on their radar, but you don't really get the threatening vibe yet. Then there's a chance where now they've kind of crossed that threshold, and now we go, oh no, I have a bad feeling about this, and this person is now encroaching on my space, and has potentially already identified me, right?
Yeah.
So maybe now we are moving into phase 2, but let's talk, and this goes back to our boundary setting, right? Our boundary setting and our ability to, again, they're still assessing, like what's, as I get closer, how close can I get, or what will this engagement be like? They're just kind of testing the boundary.
And you're assessing too. Oh wow, they're not really keeping a distance for no reason. I don't know them. What are they? There's nothing else here for them. That's an interesting token of information.
That's right, and that's when we can deploy our boundary setting strategies. And with a stranger, they can be easier for some. But what we really like to talk about is whatever feels comfortable for you, but the idea of escalating our boundary setting. So, for some people, they'll just right away be like, back up, I don't know you, and that's great. But then for others, it might feel a little bit like hard to say, what do I say to this person? And so again, with boundaries, the best thing is just clarity. So if you can say, excuse me, sir, stop right there. Okay. So we even address them in a way that was
so nice.
Yeah,
Excuse
right?
me, sir.
Excuse
Stop
me,
right
sir.
there.
Stop right there. It's very clear what we're asking them
I'm
to
like,
do.
back up! Get out of here!
Yeah. And again, that is that's great, but I want to talk to people who may not be able to pull that out,
I'm just
right?
telling you the difference between you and I.
Well, I might be there too. It depends on the situation, right? But again, we have to give you scalable tactics. We want you guys to feel like if you can't pull out that one right now because of the situation, you can pull out this one. And then go here, and then there, and then you may end up getting here, right? We might need to get there very quickly, and that's the key, is that whatever boundary setting you start at, right, you will quickly be able to assess whether you need to escalate that. So if you say, excuse me, sir, stop right there, and he stops and apologizes and walks away, you can watch him walk away, right? You can make sure you're safe, and then you can get. But if they continue, right now we have to say, sorry, I said stop, back up. And now it's like a very clear thing where you're drawing more attention, and we can escalate very quickly. Yeah. But if that, if the slap in the face, like wapow, that one doesn't feel comfortable for you to pull out at that moment, just pull out something down here and then bring it up, right? But the key is clarity. Instead of just, what do you want? Or, that's why having a clear statement of, excuse me, sir, can you stop right there? Don't come any closer, right? Something where you're giving them a command and you're actually just asking for distance. There's no way that they can misinterpret that. And then based on their response, we can then assess and we can get more distance or address how we're gonna handle that. And that's where we cover this in the Stop Block Frame class and Women Empowered, and we practice this because this idea does not come natural to many, many, many people. And this idea of using their voice and what to say and how to stand up and have your hands out and be in base and kind of moving away. And this is why it's so important to just practice that. And it's like if I had to teach anyone one lesson, it would probably be that. Because the objective and the thought is that with that being extremely effective, our risks do go down. It's not to say that it can't still continue. It absolutely can. But the risk and the likelihood, we have to think about what they want. They don't want a headache. And right now they see, oh, this is a headache that I don't want right now. I don't want to get caught. I don't want this. I want this to go my way. And that is sending a very clear message.
Which leads directly into the attacker's second phase that they very likely want to do, is to subdue and isolate you. They want to make it a quick and easy thing, and they want to do it in a way that no one else will see it. And when they do that, they will do anything at all costs to pull you somewhere, to grab you, take you into a car. And these are the tactics that we know is their primary goal: quiet and away from everybody else.
That's right. And they will do anything to accomplish this. Like, think about anything that somebody could do to overwhelm somebody in order to isolate them. So, grabbing them by their body, punching them and trying to knock them out unconscious, so dragging them, like anything you can think of where somebody is taking somebody and moving them physically to isolation. Now, there's also the consideration that phase 2 has kind of already been accomplished. So, for example, if you are in a parking lot where there's 0 people around, or on a trail where there's no one in sight, they may not actually even need to isolate, but their objective might be just to get you to the ground. So now we can kind of talk, that's their objective. Again, isolate you or get you to a place where they can control you. So what is our strategy for phase 2, right? They've already identified us as a target, and now they're just trying to overwhelm us and trying to get us to isolation. So the one thing that you can kind of think about in the back of your mind is just the idea of don't go, right? If they're trying to isolate you, whatever we have to do to not be taken from the primary scene is worth it. So in a sense, in phase 2, chaos is our friend, right? Yeah. This is where we
this is where the crazy's okay.
Yes, yeah, this is where we do anything possible to try to stay on our feet and to get distance. And so in the Women Empowered program, we address a lot of techniques and strategies for this. Some of them are wrist releases. So if someone grabs you by your wrist, how to basically get away and either follow up with a strike, or basically just get distance, right? If someone grabs us by our hips, how to frame their neck and how to get space. If someone tries to drag us by our feet, how we can get back up and get to safety.
Or by our hair.
Yeah, any way that somebody could grab you and move you, right? The objective is just do not go. And sometimes that might mean going to the ground. And even though we want to stay on our feet, to me, if the option is between fall on the ground somewhere in public, or be taken to a van or to an isolated location, I would choose falling on the ground, especially knowing what kind of tools that we have on the ground, which we'll get to in a moment. But so the idea and the strategy for phase 2 is chaos. So yelling, screaming, trying to, if there are bystanders around, trying to get them to intervene. Mm-hmm. And if there's not bystanders around, making them feel like they could intervene. So kind of spooking the guy to say, this is not going quietly and quickly. This is slow and this is loud. And we talk a lot about base, just the idea if someone's trying to move you, just how to root yourself to the ground and not go with them. So that's another principle in the Women Empowered program that we address, where one might think that the moment someone grabs you, you just want to hit them and overwhelm them. No, your only objective is to not go. So root yourself in base, scream for help, yell, cause a scene. And one note on bystander intervention is that, sometimes I would say, especially in now our society today, bystanders don't really know how to intervene, or they don't. Sometimes they do, but
they don't want to. They're too busy filming it.
Yeah, they just watch. They pull up their phone and they're just kind of standing there. So if you actually ever are in a situation where you need help, what studies have shown is that it's actually better if you can call out somebody individually, right? And you say, "Hey, white shirt, call the police," or whatever. You call them out. You look at them individually and kind of identify them and tell them what to do. Instead of, hey, somebody help me, and then everyone looks around and goes, I'm not, are you gonna do it? I don't know. And they're just pulling out their phone and filming. So to identify one person and to call them out and ask them to do something, right? Oftentimes people will respond to, this person needs me specifically, instead of am I gonna be the one to step up?
And this is a strange one as well, but I've also always been told that if something is happening to you and you need the attention of a lot of people, when you yell fire, people are more prone to respond quicker when they believe that their life is at risk as well. So if you're like, fire, 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 they're at least gonna get up and start looking around if you weren't seen or if you were just in a scuffle in the first place. Because I've been in a situation where I've seen some people kind of getting a little aggressive, a little bit of a push fight, and I'm like, is someone okay? Should I get involved? And first of all, no, I shouldn't get involved because it was 2 men and that was not for me. Maybe he don't get involved. Yeah. But when I see that, I am inclined to go, how can I help? What can I do? And these are some ways, is just getting more people's attention, pulling people away. I'm gonna call the cops. People can start to yell these things. It could really help neutralize someone who is attacking.
That's right. So chaos essentially in phase 2. Anything that you've learned in any self-defense program, including Women Empowered, we believe that in terms of escaping, we want to base our escape tactics on leverage instead of overwhelming them with punches, right? I don't want to get into a boxing match with a man who's much bigger, heavier, and stronger than I am. I want to be able to escape with leverage and timing and technique, maybe, strike them in order to put them on the defense and then get away. Remember our objective in all this, and this is something to keep driving home. Our objective is not to beat the guy up. Our objective is survival. Our objective is safety. It's basically, our objective is to make sure that they don't carry out their objective. That's it. Correct. And so for phase 2, it's anything we can do to get to safety, to get away from the situation and to flee.
Yeah, and then there's a chance that you don't get to safety and you don't flee. And then you get to what we call phase 3 of the attack, which is when they want to control and exhaust the target. And when this happens, they're going to do anything possible, physically overwhelm you, try to hold you down. And this is their main goal is it's either psychological exhaustion or physical exhaustion. So if you feel defeated mentally, like you've tried and you can see nowhere to go, there's a psychological aspect where you feel defeated and you might just give up there. Or alternatively, they've held you down for so long, they've created such a fight, they've made it so hard for you that you are physically incapable of fighting this fight again, and then they feel like they've won. Mm-hmm. And our tactic changes significantly at this point. And I mean, it's like almost a 180.
And this is where a lot of self-defense programs don't address this change in our approach. And this is where lives are saved, basically, or whether they can carry out whatever it is they have planned. Because again, their objective is to control and exhaust. And ultimately, we know that these types of crimes are crimes of power and control. So this is their objective, to overwhelm somebody and to exert their power over them and to watch them try to fight and not be successful, right? And one other thing that I'll add in terms of it could be psychological surrender or physical surrender because you exhausted all of your energy. But this is also where we talk about fight, flight, or freeze, right? It could also just be that the person has a freeze response and actually physically cannot defend or do anything.
You shift into a state of shock. And in shock, you can't respond. And what's crazy is we find that we do that sometimes with things that aren't even to the highest level of being literally physically attacked by a person. We sometimes freeze if a kid goes into the street and a car is coming, we go, and we just watch it. And it's something that is a trained response, again, for your safety. But with practice, with Women Empowered training, we can help facilitate overcoming the freeze response that we naturally go to by becoming comfortable in these positions and seeing, oh my gosh, if I get here, I don't have to freeze because I feel fully equipped. I have been smothered by the big guys that are so generously giving their time and techniques with us, and I can revisit this moment and go, oh, I've been here. I don't have to freeze now.
Yeah, and your body just responds. It's training our bodies to respond to fight or flight. Those are great, right? Freeze is not what we want, so we have to train that out of us. And it's okay that we have that response. There are some survival elements of that. Like if a deer sees that somebody, they go freeze and they just go, maybe they won't see me, right? And they just stop, and then the bear walks by. Who knows, right?
And this is primal. Kids do this too. When that kid, when the ball goes in, they look at they don't know what to do with this. Again, this is not something you did wrong if you've ever felt freeze or if you've ever experienced it, but it's a very primal and back of the lower brain response to what's happening.
Yeah. So again, what is our strategy then for phase 3? So we talked about the training, but really the number one goal for phase 3 in terms of our survival strategy is energy conservation. Yep. That is the name of the game. Welcome to Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, that is the name of the game of Jiu-Jitsu.
You've now been invited.
Yes. It's energy conservation. So while in phase 2, we said, you know what? Do whatever you got to do. Fight, go crazy, yell, scream. There might be a lot of energy exhaustion during that phase, but it's worth it if they get freaked out and they run, or you are able to break free and you can get back up to your feet and run out, right? That might be a burst of energy that you use that is well spent. Once you get to the ground and now you have somebody on top of you, holding you down, if we believe that same amount of energy and fight and just go crazy will get us out of that, that's where we end up being defeated, is in this phase 3. So it's so important to understand this, right? That there's like Victoria said, there's like a complete 180, where now our objective is to conserve energy. It's to breathe. It's to not panic. It's to be able to default to our training. And this is where training comes into play. Because it's, imagine just trying to tell somebody, you're there on the bottom of the fight getting punched in the face. You're like, hey, just relax, breathe. It's okay. You can't do that unless you understand how to do that, which is like the Punch Block series and the Women Empowered program, where that's just basically treading water, learning how the bottom of the fight just to stay in it and not get knocked out, right? That ability to conserve energy while they're exhausting theirs. So having the tools to do that, to be able to, you know, be able to breathe through it and to kind of stay focused and conserve energy while they're exhausting theirs. That's the name of the game for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
If this is our opponent, right, they're bigger, heavier, and stronger than us, and this is us, we aren't necessarily going to defeat them this way, right? What we have to do is conserve energy while they exhaust theirs. And once we conserve and they exhaust, once they get here and down here, now it doesn't matter that they're bigger, heavier, and stronger, because they've exhausted their energy, and that's our opportunity to either escape or use one of our submissions or chokes or an arm lock or whatever, and then be able to escape.
Yeah, we need to outsmart, out technique, or out energy them, because they're if they are in fact bigger, heavier, stronger than us. That's our only hope.
And if we don't do this and we keep going with a phase 2, no, I'm gonna get out of this no matter what, guess what? Very quickly, within 30 seconds, one will exhaust all of their energy that they have. If you really think that you can out-muscle somebody who's bigger than you on the ground, you will exhaust yourself completely. And then this is exactly what they have planned, which is that now there is no, even when, you know, they continue to move on, we've got nothing left. So whether it's psychological and you're so scared that you say, okay, you know, like that they can feel that and they know that they have that control over you, kind of that psychological control, or whether they've established physical control and there's absolutely no fight left. This is what phase 3 is about, and them accomplishing that, right?
Yeah, and once they have accomplished this, we can enter into stage 4, which has some muddy waters here, but we call it carrying out the assault, carrying out what they had initially planned with you. And there's a really beautiful back door that is still, it's like our last hope. And we call it the false surrender. And it's probably one of the most hidden secrets. If you're a male with bad intentions right now, please log off. We don't want you to know this one.
Hopefully they've been logged off for a minute.
Please go away.
Yeah.
No,
they're not here.
The idea of the false surrender is this. If they are going to have the bad intentions and get us to a point where we've exhausted all of our possibilities up until then, we're going to do something that women have never done in the history of women. We're going to lie. Okay? We're going to lie. We're going to say, please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you want. I give up. Now pause. You don't give up. You won't let him do whatever he wants. And yeah, please don't hurt me. And what we're doing is we're buying ourselves time, because they said it, a great analogy in last week's seminar. It's the rope analogy, right?
Yes. So yeah, ultimately, yeah, Henry had made this great analogy, which is the idea that somebody cannot, you either have to control somebody 100%, like you're either 100% focused on control or you're advancing the fight, right? But you cannot advance the fight and control somebody at the same time. And this is, again, another jiu-jitsu principle that's not just women empowered. This is all of jiu-jitsu. It's the idea that if someone's controlling you, they're focused on holding your body. They're not, the moment they go for a strike or they go to do something, there's now been space opened up. So that's a window of opportunity, of escape. And so, yeah, this analogy of a rope. To climb a rope, you have to let go of the rope in order to advance and to keep climbing. And guess what? When they let go of the rope to go climb, that's when they only have one hand on the rope. And that is our opportunity.
That's
right?
the back door. That's the window. That's the place that when we sit there, we're like, okay, there's no way out. There's no way out. I give up. Please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you want. That's when they give you a little bit of air to, boom, back door out. Whether that's the shrimp escape or whatever the attack that's happening at the time, we have all sorts of options in the program to help you find what you'll need in the moment. And we all pocket those. And again, it'll be different for everybody.
It will be. So the biggest idea of false surrender is, even if you forget those words to be said, it's really about surrendering your body and then feeling that, right? So we use the analogy of like a bird, right? If a bird were to fly in here and we wanted to catch the bird and put it into a cage, okay? We got the bird, we held it, and the bird's flapping crazy, right? The moment I grab it, the bird hates this, and the bird's flapping, trying to get away. Right? So when will I think about moving the bird into the cage? The moment the bird has no flap left and it can no longer flap its wings.
Or is not resisting at all.
And is not resisting. And now they've calmed down. I've accomplished phase 3 basically. And then I go, okay, now that the bird has calmed down, I'm going to put you into the cage. And now the bird's in the cage, right? So what we're saying is that as the bird, right, the bird goes flap, and they go, oh, I'm not going to get out. So you know what? I'm just going to stop flapping. And then the moment they open their hand, boom, I'm gone, right? And so that's really what we're doing, is the idea that there are possibilities, even with jiu-jitsu and understanding jiu-jitsu and learning women empowered or any kind of jiu-jitsu from the ground. There's a chance that there's really not an escape from a certain type of position, or the control is so dominant that we don't actually have a way to escape at that very moment, okay? And that's okay. The objective is then this idea of the false surrender. Our body, instead of actually getting to that physical point of exhaustion where we have nothing left, we make them believe that they've accomplished phase 3. That's the goal. We make them believe that phase 3 has either been accomplished through psychological control or physical control. And we stop everything, and we breathe, and we focus, and we can use those 3 statements. I give up. Please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you want. Because again, those 3 statements were specifically chosen because this is what they want, control, right? And the most important thing is that our physical body stops fighting. Once they say, okay, the fight has stopped, now they transition into what? Climbing the rope. And they continue on with the, whatever it is they have planned, or the assault. But as you transition from control to an assault, a window of opportunity opens up. And the challenge is, if you can't identify what that window looks like, you won't know how to escape at that moment. And that's really why we teach what we teach. And in Women Empowered, the whole objective is, what does that window look like? And for those of you who train Women Empowered, you know that, especially with the guard getup, that's why we practice the false surrender variation. Basically, the moment your hips are free, or the moment there's an ability for you to basically post their body, scoot your body out, and then, be able to, offensively kick them and get up and base, that's when we would do that. But if you can't identify what that opportunity even looks like, then it's hard to, again, just to say, hey, just relax, breathe, and wait until you feel like you can maybe escape. How do you identify that if you've never trained that and your body has not learned that? So that is the ultimate objective into the transition between phase 3 and phase 4, is maybe make them, if we can escape in phase 3 using jiu-jitsu or leverage or other things, then we wait for that transition, and we make them believe it's been accomplished. Take a deep breath, and then we wait for an opportunity. And when that opportunity happens, boom, we're out of there.
Now, we've beautifully painted the 4 phases for you in a way that seems very linear and very like step by step by step. And what that could give you a false illusion in your mind is that it's going to go as prescribed, the way Victoria and Eve said, because they said so. Don't listen to us always like that, okay? What you have to understand is these 4 phases are not only a generalization, but they're also not equally spaced out. One can be skipped, like she's mentioned earlier. One can be skipped. One can be bypassed completely. One could take hours. Like the isolation one could be hours. You could be in isolation for hours before any control or exhaustion even comes into play. Or you get to phase 4 and you find the back door in the false surrender, and you find yourself back up in phase 2 again, looking for a way to get back down, and you start the process all over again. So know that these are planned out so you can identify where you are in them, only so that you can adjust your response to what's happening, to understand how can I defend this. And if you have to go between and you're bouncing between the two, anything you can for survival. That's the only reason why we've played it out like this, so that you can see, where am I, how do I react, and then where do I need to shift again. It's like changing gears. If you've ever changed gears in a car, I'm going this way, oh, I need to shift gear again and again. And that shifting of gears will be the difference between like getting to safety and remaining in that position for a lot longer than you want to.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's almost like after, the escape happens, you're kind of almost back in phase 2 psychology, which is like, once you feel like there's an opportunity for escape and you've broken free from them, now we're back in whatever you can do, run crazy, like that's the moment we've conserved our energy so that when we can use it, we'll use it.
Yeah.
Right? Great point. So yeah, that is, again, understanding this is, the most important thing is just knowing how to adjust which tools we use in each phase. Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to first learn the tools. And once you learn the tools, you just got this really cool tool belt, and you just equip yourself to walk through the world like an old Western cowboy. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Although it might help.
And I really believe that when it comes to just understanding this and understanding kind of like what the worst case scenario even looks like, and having even put yourself potentially there in training, right? And being able to say, I can visualize and have a plan for the worst case scenarios in this. It actually makes us more willing to be able to even identify these potential threats to begin with, right? Because I think when we go back to phase 1 now, what's the number one reason why we don't often do this? Why we don't look somebody in the eye? Why we don't, address them verbally? And we talked a little bit about this last week. Sometimes it's like embarrassment, or it's feeling like, oh, I don't want to make a scene if they're not really a bad person. But I think there's also something deeper too, which is like, I don't even want to deal with the possibility that this is a real threat, that this is real. And it's kind of like that denial thing of just saying, you know what, if I pretend like that's not there, it'll just go away. And we do that with a lot of things in life, right?
I think denial is also deeply rooted in fear, right?
Absolutely.
Fear is a huge driving factor of like, oh, this is not really happening to me. He's not looking at me. This is not going to go down. And the difficulty there, if we go so far down the rabbit hole of fear, we're actually not in a ready state to handle what is already coming inevitably. What is going to happen, again, if those intentions are bad anyways, going down that dark spiral of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, is this happening? It's only going to make it worse. So it's almost like, how do we get that deep breath? How do we go, okay, and go into acceptance? So moving from fear to acceptance is one of the most difficult parts that psychologically readies us for phase 1, and then phase 2, and then phase 3.
Yeah, and that's it. There's no shortcut to this. It is actually, this is why we believe in what we do, because we really believe that the only way to truly train our body to respond this ways to the different types of potential threats is through training. It is basically having our body learn, because when our mind, it's almost like when your mind leaves, your body has to know what to do. And guess what? Our mind will leave. And that's like one of the things I love most about doing the pink belt tests and being able to test our women when they test for their pink belt. And basically the pink belt is a test that after you complete the Women Empowered program, we basically make you do every single technique, and then at the end we kind of like attack you with like random attacks and approaches, and it's where we see how the reflex develop. And inevitably, what's funny is that during the first part of the test, where I say, okay, now we're going to do all the wrist releases, and I grab them by their wrist and they do it, or now I'm going to do arm lock from the guard. People do a little bit worse in that part, and the reason why is because they're thinking, and they go, okay, now I have to do that thing. All right, I'm gonna do the thing. All right, I'm gonna do it. And their mind's taking over. Yeah. And what's funny and what's beautiful is that when it comes to the reflex development part in this freestyle demo, that's actually when the women shine, because guess what? We stop thinking. And oftentimes as women, that's what gets in the way of like everything. Is like, we'll go, just stop thinking so much about it. And so I love watching that and just being able to go, hey, stop thinking and just react, and watching people's bodies just move and react, and now their body takes over. And that's why we do those tests, so that you can see, what does my body know when my brain leaves? Because naturally they're all nervous and there's some adrenaline there. And so that's when you get to test that. And having that ability to test, what is my body capable of when my mind checks out? That's what we want to get to.
I've learned that in quarantine, my body knows that I need to eat every 2 hours while my mind checks out.
It just walks over to the kitchen. I'm not even thinking about it, and then it just starts
fourth meal
eating.
Before 9 a.m.
It's just my body is doing it, not me. I stop thinking about it. Totally.
Just learned that. So.
Yeah, we have those.
Yeah.
Amazing.
A lot of people were asking, do you feel complete with this?
I do, yeah. If we can address any questions, either specifically about this or anything else, but if there's something that...
Well, one of the questions that, for those of you who are watching live or want to refer back to this again, is our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is where we're hosting the repeats of these.
Yeah, so we have purposely created these videos, but made them unlisted, so that everyone can access them, but we kind of keep it within our community, right? So we don't invite a bunch of just unnecessarily, people intruding on our comments and everything else who don't necessarily align with what the conversation is here. So you can share it to everyone and anyone who you feel like would benefit. But in order to access the previous ones on our Women Empowered Facebook page, we'll have them kind of posted there. We're still figuring out this whole like YouTube live and everything, and trying to find the best way to save these videos and post them later. So bear with us.
Yeah, we just realized that there are so many different peoples from different generations on different platforms, from Instagram to Facebook, from MySpace to TikTok, all these different things that people are using. So we're trying to figure out what resonates best with our community. So we appreciate your patience on all this.
Me too. Amazing. Alia, were there any questions that came up throughout, or do you guys have any questions now? You can add them into the chat, and then we can address any.
Yeah, and my question, Alia, are you looking on the YouTube questions too, as well as the Instagram? Perfect.
Amazing.
Alia, our girl here, has got it down. She's figuring it out. One of the things that I think I am excited to talk about next week, just to hook you for next week, is we were talking about discussing boundaries and anxiety some more possibly. A lot of people have been writing in about the anxiety that they're feeling, that especially living in isolation, they were already feeling a certain sense of anxiety when the world was mobile and doing their things, but now it's like almost a grander weight of distance and isolation for them. And that's Bill's goal next week, is to kind of talk about how to care for ourselves during the time of the anxiety.
Yeah, and what tools we are all using to manage that anxiety and to help us process everything.
Yeah.
Alia, do you have them here? I'm gonna grab these questions here. Perfect.
The questions are coming.
All right, so one question we just answered, which is the how do we go back and watch week 1 and 2 Facebook page. Let's see. Oh, we also forgot to mention today that we all of this information is in our handbook, right? So the Women Empowered, or the Empowerment Handbook, is available for everyone who has a profile. You can create a profile for free on gracieuniversity.com. And under my dashboard, my content, under my files, there's a download for the the Empowerment Handbook. And this is it. And actually today's talk, which probably should have told you before, but that was starting on page 27. So we talk about the triangle of victimization, the phases 1 through 4 of a stranger attack. So you can also access the handbook either online, you can print it out, and we actually have had a few requests of just the handbook. So I think we're going to look into printing these separately. Right now they only come with the DVDs. The DVD set, remember those things? They only come with that when you buy the whole package, but the download is available for free for all of you here. So you can read more information or share it with a buddy, whatever you want to do. So great question on, do you have a book? Interesting. So
the question says, I'm going to do this
one here. Yeah.
It says, how do you deal with overcoming the freeze response, possibly turning into false confidence? If I understand that correctly, you're saying that I feel like I'm not sure I understand it fully. Do you have an idea of like?
I think I have an idea, which is the concern of, basically, are we giving ourselves, or the fear of, am I giving myself false confidence to act instead of freeze, right? Or basically, do I, in training, I might feel like I've overcome the freeze response, but then in reality, I haven't.
Oh, I see.
So maybe like you have this false confidence of, oh yeah, I've overcome it, and then really when it sets in, you go, oh wait, maybe I haven't.
It's only one way to know, and I hope you never have to find out. That's
yes,
kind of like, to really put it to the test, you have to be in the situation, right?
Correct. Yeah. The actual, obviously the only true way to find out how you respond in an exact situation is you create that exact scenario. Now yes. Now, what you can do is,
simulations.
Especially, exactly. Simulations and continuing training. So here's the thing, is that obviously in Women Empowered, we try to, especially in the beginning, we're only focused on techniques. We really feel like somebody needs to be able to learn a technique without too much chaos around it, so there's no distractions from the actual technique itself, right? So that you're focused on, hey, what am I actually learning here? Then once you learn that and your body learns that, right? Then you can go, all right, now I want to increase intensity. And so at some point, the key is not doing it too early, right? So what you don't want to do is you're only 2 stripes in and you go, okay, now I'm ready. Somebody come at me. Hey, husband or boyfriend or brother or somebody, now come at me and I want to practice. Because then actually you can affect your confidence and you go, oh my gosh, I don't know this stuff. And then you actually feel like, oh, it doesn't work. Whereas what you need to do is master it, right? In the context of kind of a safe environment and really understand the nuances of the techniques. And then when you're ready, basically once you're a pink belt, that's when you go, you know what? I really want to feel what happens when the intensity levels increase. And there's a few ways you can do that. If you have somebody that you feel like, and you go, feel somebody safe, that maybe has limited training, and you go, I just want to see how, hey, try to hold me down and see what happens, and just kind of play with them. And that way, the other option is continuing training, Gracie Combatives, right? Gracie Combatives, Master Cycle. And really all you're doing is intensifying the different types of training
And
partners
diversifying.
and diversifying your training partners, right? So if you are if you've only trained with women, it's a good opportunity to say, you know what, I actually would like to try this on a man who has a much bigger body, a different body type, and see how this technique works. So it really is, going to be up to you and your training and kind of continuing that training to be able to put it to the test. And that's the only way you're going to get closer to that, is just continuing the training and intensifying the training as you go.
I would say, now that you're speaking about it this way, one of the most common things I do see amongst people that have come to Women Empowered and taken 1 to 5 classes, let's say, is the 6th class is a story. Yeah, I went home and I tried this on my boyfriend. And it's honestly so beautiful and such a testament to the empowering feeling that a woman gets after learning 1 class, 2 classes. They go home and they're ready to take on their ex-boyfriends, the guy down the street that creeps them out. Like, they're down. But it also is, like she said, one of the biggest setbacks for yourself if it doesn't work, because all things aren't necessarily as you seem yet, because you haven't learned the full scope of the program. We're giving you almost like a bite size at a time, and then by the end you'll have the full pizza and full oh, that's why we needed the crust to hold in the thing. I get it. Mm-hmm. So it's almost a beautiful gift that you are building that confidence. But I highly advocate for, if you are very early on in the training of this, not trying to just try this on everyone that you know.
Yes, even a boyfriend or husband. Or
with all
anything.
good intentions, even if they train jiu-jitsu, because the Women in Power program, what I love about it is people are like, oh, it's for women, this thing is different. It's jiu-jitsu. All these movements are jiu-jitsu based movements. We've just looked at female attack scenarios and applied them to the defense of this situation. And when we looked at that, it doesn't mean that this isn't any other kind of jiu-jitsu. So if you have a jiu-jitsu practitioner, partner, friend, whatever that's trying to help you do it, they may not be privy to these particular movements because it's not sport, or it's not, again, in combatives and Women Empowered overlap kind of like this. So there are some that you're not getting if you're doing combatives as a female, and there are some in combatives you're not getting if you're doing only Women Empowered. So just know that it's all good jiu-jitsu stuff, but they may not be able to give you the perfect practice partner if they in fact aren't privy to the moves.
That's right. That's great. Anything else, Alia?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we got more questions coming. I like it.
Can I see? Or we can just show me that too if you want. Cool. Okay.
We're so grateful to be here, you guys. This has been such a soul-giving thing for us to be able to sit and share that, which we love to talk about all the time, but with people who actually want to listen to it. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for just continuing to share this with other women who we know need it, and we are really just appreciative.
Share it with your friends.
Yeah.
Great questions here. So one is, what do you do if the bad guy's ego engages and his anger that you're defending yourself ups the anger? So this is
Ups the danger.
Ups the danger. Sorry, anger and danger. There's just a D, different word. But so basically, this is the question or the idea that if we defend ourselves, that now the bad guy may get more angry and it may escalate the situation. And really, this is again where jiu-jitsu is so beautiful, because it has this. We talk about this concept of scalable options, right? Where the goal is to neutralize the threat. So while sometimes escalating is necessary, because we actually need to maybe strike somebody, elbow them in the face in order for them to do this so that we have an opportunity for escape, there's also this ability of being able to just neutralize. And to be honest, that actually works in our favor. If like when I think about stage 3 and I think about somebody trying to overwhelm and control us, how exhausting it would be for them and demoralizing for them when all they want to do is punch us in the face. And with punch block series, we're controlling the distance, we're holding them. Basically, it's not going according to their plan. And that actually their anger and their frustration, and I know this because I've gotten angry training, and it doesn't work in my it doesn't work, it doesn't help me, let's put it that way. So when somebody actually, that's the goal, is kind of to get them flustered and overwhelmed, and they're just exhausting energy while we're just breathing and waiting and waiting, and all we're waiting for is for this to happen, right? So we don't want to get into a situation and think that we can just escape right away. It's going to take some time. It actually might take a minute for them to completely exhaust. And all we have to worry about, our number one objective is don't get punched, don't get knocked out, and don't get choked unconscious. Those are the 2 things that we mostly need to address during phase 3. As long as we can keep ourselves from those things happening while conserving energy, then we have the opportunity, once they try everything, and then boop, they kind of slip and they create a situation where they're giving us an opportunity for escape or an arm lock or a choke or something like that, then we can take it. So
yeah, and what I think about this, E, when you're saying if his anger increases and therefore the danger increases, we also get into the idea of weapons. And that is something that if he's not getting the power he wants to control you, he may introduce a weapon into the situation. And our program does address a lot of these situations on that. So if you're not familiar with it, please check it out. And if you are familiar with it, you understand that inviting that weapon into the situation changes a bit of the game. We start to go into negotiation. And so these phases, while still very important, the minute a weapon arrives, we go, okay, danger. The danger game has turned differently. And that's what I feel when I hear that. I'm like, oh my gosh, if it ups the danger, how?
Mm-hmm.
Versus
Right.
just punching, which again, punch block series can help hopefully in that as well.
Absolutely. And I actually think we could do another talk another time and focus a little bit on weapons specifically and how to approach that, because it does have it's a somewhat different approach. But also know that it's a low percentage of assaults that are carried out with a weapon. So everyone says, oh, what if they have a gun, it's actually a very low percentage, in part because the sentence or the punishment goes way up if it's an assault, armed assault, right, as opposed to just an assault. So whether that's what's keeping them from using weapons or not, but the percentage is much lower. I don't know that number exactly off the top of my head, but I'll have it for you maybe next week. But I know that it's in the low range of assaults that are actually carried out with a weapon in the hand. Mm-hmm. Cool. And then it says, you talk about exhausting people in stage 3, but subduing in stage 2. And then they said, subduing to me means exhausting someone physically or psychologically or both. What is your definition of subdue in stage 2? So this is a good question, and it potentially could mean that, right? Really what we're defining as subdue is overwhelming them. It essentially is controlling them, but it's like kind of in a different way. It's controlling them with an objective. Controlling them with the objective of isolating them or subduing them, because it might literally be phase 2 could be as quickly, if they're already isolated, phase 2 could be as quickly as boom, and down you're on the ground. Now we're into phase 3, right? So phase 2 actually could be a very quick thing, or it could be much longer, where subdue means maybe they try to grab you by your hips, and now we frame them, we get distance, and they come at us, and then they try to overwhelm us with punches, and we clench, and we disengage, now we're away, right? So they're just trying to gain control, right? Once they actually have gained the control, and now they've got us onto the ground or to isolation, phase 3 is already accomplished. So it's kind of like the process of accomplishing the control is subduing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think we talked about that.
Yes, yep. And
this says, I have a question about working with women who have experienced violence or have had an attack, and we are working through some of the moves that create a trauma response.
Women
Triggers.
Empowered ICP.
Yeah, we have an entire certification program that we walk teachers through how to handle the situation, and it is a very delicate one because sometimes the women don't even know what will trigger them. It could be a person, it could be a smell, it could be a movement, it could be a situation. And in our program for instructors, we walk them through how to handle that, how to then even deal with the grounding afterwards, how to approach it, little things that we can say that will maybe mitigate triggers as much as possible. Again, sometimes we don't know. And
yeah, we really believe in taking kind of a trauma-informed approach to instruction, and that is that's why we added an entire module in our Women Empowered Instructor Certification program to focus on this, because we believe that anyone who's teaching self-defense, hands down, 100%, you will be teaching somebody who has experienced trauma in their history. 100%, I can guarantee you that right now. I'll put $1 million on that bet, right? If you're teaching a number of women in your community, you will encounter somebody who has had a past experience. And the people deal with those differently, and triggers do happen. And we could even maybe go in depth on that another week as well, because there's a lot to talk about how those happen and how we experience triggers in our everyday lives, even if they don't have this crazy effect to us, but we do get triggered by things. And how do we identify those, right? So it's helping them to identify them. It's holding space for them when they need it, and it's kind of giving them the tools to do whatever they need to feel safe in that moment. And allow them to make a choice to basically, leave the mat, come back, and basically the do's and don'ts of how to approach that situation. Yeah. And I think, again, this could actually be a whole topic in itself, because it's good even just with your training partners to understand this, and with people in your lives. Like, when people experience something like this, what is our natural instinct? And our natural instinct is often to fix and to help, and that's not always what's needed at that time.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to take a look at what trauma is for people, because there's 3 main different kinds of trauma. There's acute trauma, which is a one-time event that happened, and it happened to them, and it was grand enough to make a difference in their lives.
Acute trauma, not acute trauma.
Not cute, but acute.
Acute trauma.
There is perpetual, which means it's ongoing. They're continually in that situation, whether that's a domestic violence situation, whether that's an emotional kind of abuse situation. The perpetual is it's still ongoing and happening now, which triggers are more likely to be obvious and overt, and then they're going to be a little bit out of sorts and like almost disengaging with you more. And then there's complex, and the complex traumas really come from a place of a mixture of the acute and the perpetual, and that means that sometimes they have short stints of the trauma, and then there's other ones that is a major happening, and it's a complex of the two, either throughout their life, within a short period of time most recently, or back in the history of their lifetime that it was 10 years ago. So understanding how trauma works in our existence and how it could be so differently approached can also help in your teaching methodologies, which again is all offered in our instructor certification program at Gracie University. So hopefully that helped a little bit for you guys.
That is. There's one more question that we can address, and then maybe we can wrap it up and save the rest for the following weeks. One question was, what are our personal favorite techniques from the Women Empowered?
Oh my God.
That's like asking me to pick my favorite child.
We won't do it.
So,
I won't do it.
But I will say, I think I will try to give an answer to this. And there's one that are like favorite in terms of doing them, where you're like, oh, that feels awesome, and I feel like a badass when I break this person's arm, right? But then there's others that I go, okay, if I knew, if someone came to me and said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be attacked by somebody. This is going to happen at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and I've got one day to learn everything I can to survive. I would have my pick of what to teach them, right? And so, the number one thing I would teach them is punch block series. And it's in the Women Empowered program. Those of you who aren't familiar with it, you can log on to Gracie University, and you can even just buy just that lesson and learn just the idea of being able to manage distance and stay safe. And it's basically the idea of, if I throw somebody in the pool, they need to know how to tread water until they can get to the side of the pool to climb out. That's what punch block series is. It's treading water in a fight. It's learning how to just basically survive in the bottom while doing what we talked about, conserve energy while the other person exhausts. And then once that happens, then we've got escapes. And then that's where I have to pick all my other favorite children, which is just way too hard. But punch block series for one. And then, like I said before, the stop block frame class. So just understanding that. And guess what? Even if you got a false confidence, I'll take a false confidence over no confidence, right? Yeah. So I really, it's just the ability of being able to look somebody and hold a stance and, assert a boundary. Just being able to do that is so, so important. But we'd also know that sometimes it takes the physical, knowing that you got all these physical tools to pull from, physical techniques to enable to empower us to set those boundaries. So that's why, the rest of the program is so important.
Let's see. When I think about my favorites, I think, okay, first, what's flashy? Flashy, rear choke defense. Yes. What's fierce? I really like the triangle. Doing that on someone makes it like you see them go.
Triangle is like, it really is. Like the idea, triangle choke is basically the idea that you're on the bottom of the fight and you can defeat somebody.
With your legs.
Somebody's in between your legs. You're on the bottom of the fight. Someone's in between your legs. Think about any potential sexual assault situation, and that likely will be a similar picture. And from that position, you can wrap your legs around their neck with their arm, and you render them unconscious. You can basically kill somebody with your legs from the bottom of the fight. Think about how empowering that is when we talk about worst case scenarios and having options. Like, it's beautiful. So, just
it's
all
beautiful.
The techniques. I love my children.
You guys, how much, some of you might talk about either your kids or your handbags or your jewelry. She talks about techniques. Oh my gosh, you're like literally a jiu-jitsu man's dream. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you for letting us into your homes, into your hearts, and for giving us your time, because we know that there are so many other places you could be. The kitchen, the bedroom,
somebody else's live
other
places.
I know how many people are going live right now, so I just want to send extreme gratitude to you guys, and I'm really proud that you are investing in something that is really important in your life, and that is you.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Bye.